Well, good morning to everyone. I hope everyone sticks around for the potluck afterwards. Try to just get along and just enjoy life with each other. This morning, the topic we're talking about is heaven and hope. There's a quote by C.S. Lewis. I really enjoy C.S. Lewis's writings. He wrote the Chronicles of Narnia, but he wrote a lot more about our faith. And he wrote this: hope is one of the theological virtues. This means, and he's talking about hope, that a continual looking forward to the eternal world is not, as some modern people think, a form of escapism or wishful thinking, but is one of the things a Christian is meant to do. It does not mean that we are to leave the present world as it is. If you read history, you'll find that the Christians who did most for this present world were just those who thought of the next. The apostles themselves, who set on the conversion of the Roman Empire. The great men who built up the Middle Ages. The English evangelicals who abolished the slave trade. All left their mark on earth precisely because their minds were occupied with heaven. This morning, my message is very simple. Humans have souls. The soul lives after the body dies. When Jesus returns, the body and the soul are reunited. The bodies and the souls of the faithful will be united in heaven. But the bodies and souls of the faithless are destroyed in hell. Because when we get to heaven, there are going to be two things that surprise us. One, who is there, and two, who is not. And so I got a couple of passages this morning talking about heaven, talking about the afterlife, talking about the life after this one. The first one is Matthew 22. And in this one, we got Jesus, and he's in the situation where he's got people coming to him with trick questions. People who aren't really interested in a genuine answer. People who really aren't trying to learn, but they're trying to get Jesus to say something that would make people mad. They're trying to get Jesus to say something that would be against the law so that they could label him as a false prophet, or they're trying to get him to say something that the Romans wouldn't like so that they could get the Romans to arrest him. They're trying to paint him into a corner. And Jesus, being as wise as he is, always knows how to answer the situation. And so these guys are going to come with a question about the resurrection. They're going to come with a question about the afterlife, right? They're talking about heaven, but they don't really believe in this. And so Jesus knows right away that this is more of a trick question than a genuine question. And so the question centers around this woman. And in the Jewish law, if a man passed away before having children, it was the responsibility of the brother, if he was unmarried, to marry the widow. And he would have children with that woman so that they could continue the lineage. Because in the law of Moses, it was a bad thing for you to pass away before having children. And so there's this woman, hypothetical woman, who marries someone, he passes away, marries the next, passes away, marries the next. What's the situation going to be like in heaven? You'll see it whenever I read it. Matthew 22, they come to Jesus with this question. Teacher, Moses said, if a man dies having no children, his brother must marry the widow and raise up offspring for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers among us. The first married and died, having no offspring, left his wife to his brother. So too the second and the third, down to the 7th. After them all, the woman died. In the resurrection, therefore, of the 7, whose wife will she be? For they all had her as a wife. So, they're coming to Jesus with this question, and they think they got him, right? They think there's no way to answer this question. I mean, this is one of those questions they ask to prove that there's no afterlife, right? Because, let's say this does happen. You marry someone, they pass away, you marry a second person. Well, in heaven, things are going to get pretty awkward, aren't they? Because you got both of them there, right? And this is kind of a legitimate question, but they're going to an extreme with it. And I want to say one thing, all right? This situation is absurd. A woman marries a man, he dies, marries his brother, he dies, Marries another brother, he dies. Marries another brother, he dies. Is this woman taking out life insurance policies on these guys? Something's fishy here. Don't marry this woman, you know? But it's a silly situation, but it's also like a legitimate question. I mean, how's that going to work out in heaven? Jesus, being just amazing, knows how to answer it right away. And they're asking this question like, oh, we got you in a trap. We know, we have just disproven the existence of heaven. We have just shown you how illogical it is to think there's a life after this one. Jesus replies, and I think he's got three things he wants to say. First, he says, y'all don't know what y'all talking about. All right? I like how he says it, though. You are wrong because you know neither the Scriptures nor the power of God. That's powerful. And he just looks them dead in the eyes like, no, you're wrong. Second thing, here he just answers the question, right? In the resurrection, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like the angels in heaven. So he says, ain't no marriage in heaven, y'all. All right? That's how my relatives in Texas would say this. And he could stop there, because he answered the question, right? I mean, they come with this question, and these two things are basically the answer, like, okay, first off, you're wrong on your premise and your question. Second off, this is how it is. There's not going to be any marriage in heaven. But he doesn't stop there, because he knows they're trying to disprove the afterlife, and he's going to show them, let me give you a passage that proves the afterlife. Let me give you a passage, because the people asking him these questions, they didn't believe in a soul. They didn't believe in a spirit. They didn't believe in angels. They didn't believe in the afterlife. And so Jesus is going to show them the truth. He quotes to them Moses, which they're quoting from. Or he quotes to them what God said to Moses. And as for the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what was said to you by God? I am the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not God of the dead, but of the living. Now, the next verse would say they were all silenced because of how amazing his teaching was. And you got to take a second and look at this verse to kind of see what he's trying to say, right? You see, we're probably familiar with this passage in Exodus 3. It's the story of where Moses is a shepherd, and he's out in the desert, and he sees a bush burning on flame, but not being consumed by the flame. Out in the desert, things burn really fast because they're so dry. But this bush is still on fire, and still on fire, and still on fire, and nothing's happening. Right? And so Moses, he goes up to the bush. God says, take your sandals off, this is holy ground. He speaks through the bush. God says to Moses, this is how God introduces himself, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. How does this relate? You know, you ever read something, especially in your Bible, 20 different times, and then on the 21st time, you're like, wow, I never noticed that. That's kind of what Jesus is showing us right here. And I think this is just so awesome because Jesus is pointing out something that none of the Jews would have ever noticed. This is something that maybe we would have never noticed. You know, and in our Bible studies, when you're reading your Bible, if you would take a second to go through each word and stop and think about each word, you're going to notice things that you've never noticed before. And one of the most amazing things that Jesus is bringing out, that God said right here, is in the word am. I am the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. See, if you look at the timetable, this is a little bit strange because Moses, and these are approximate dates, Moses was called here at the burning bush, but Jacob had been dead for about 400 years. Isaac had been dead about 440 years before that, and Abraham had been dead about 540 years before that. So it's a little strange to say, I am the God of Abraham. Don't you mean I was the God of Abraham? Is God bad at grammar? Like, for instance, you know, my grandpa in my hometown, He amassed such an amazing reputation. He was one of the nicest, best, hardworking people you would ever meet. And in my small town of Perrin, Texas, that no one's ever heard of, that had maybe 2,000 people in it, all those 2,000 people knew about Bobby Johnston. And all the time, people would make connections, and they would say, "Aren't you Bobby Johnston's grandson?" And I would proudly tell them, "Yes. Yes, I am." And they would tell me, "Oh, he's gold. He is the best person you've ever met. I have never seen him ever get angry at anyone. He's always treated everyone with respect." And for years, people would know me as Bobby Johnston's grandson. I would tell people all the time, "Bobby Johnston is my grandfather." And people might not correct me because of the subject matter, but now that my grandfather has passed away, wouldn't it be inaccurate to say, "I am Bobby Johnston's grandson"? Or "Bobby Johnston is my grandfather"? No, Bobby Johnston was my grandfather. God here, He doesn't say, "I was the God of Abraham." Even though this is 500 years ago. Abraham's been gone for 500 years. It says, "I am the God of Abraham." When talking about the deceased, God spoke in present tense. What does that mean? Jesus says, the conclusion to draw from this, God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. That doesn't make sense, does it, right? Because God is the God of the living. What are you talking about? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they're dead, right? They have passed away hundreds of years ago, 400 years ago, 450 years, 550 years ago. What are you talking about? God is the God of the living. And so this is God basically saying, hey, they're alive. And Jesus is pointing this out. Hey, they're alive. You know, sometimes I've had people tell me, you focus too much on every single word of the Bible and you put too much weight and gravity to every single word. Listen, this is Jesus making a point saying on the verb tense of this two-letter word, you can drive the point home that every person who has passed away, though their body is dead, they still live. Every person born with it has within them a soul. Whatever you want to call it, it goes by whatever name you want to call it. Soul, our spirit, our mind, our consciousness, our heart. Whatever you want to call it. We have a part of our existence that is not physical or material. And when the body dies, the soul continues on. You have this passage with Jesus who says, "And do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul." Right? And so there is this separation of body and soul, where there are situations where the body, it does die, but the soul does not. James would say the body, apart from the spirit, is dead. We have a soul. That is the primary existence of a person. And just because the body dies doesn't mean the soul dies. The body is this extension of who we are, the vessel of the soul. You are a soul with a body, not a body with a soul. Your primary existence is spiritual. But a lot of people today have abandoned this idea that we have a soul. A lot of people have gone on to the concept of materialism. I mean, not in the colloquial way, but in believing that everything that exists is only matter. We need to teach this very important truth. Because when we teach people all you are is physical, then all you get out of life is physical. But when you teach people you are a spiritual being, then we need to live in a way that nourishes our spiritual existence. There's comfort in knowing that even when the body stops working, the soul lives on. That the people that we love who have passed away, though their bodies, though their hearts are stopped working, though we've put them in the ground, their soul continues on. When we die, our body and our soul are separated because the body goes in the ground. But when the Lord returns, He resurrects the body, meaning the soul and the body come back together. And that's before we go to heaven or hell when Christ is going to split mankind. Humans have souls, and the souls live after the body dies. This other passage, right? Where this gentleman comes to Jesus. He's a soldier, and he comes to Jesus and he says, "Jesus, can you heal my servant?" And Jesus says, "Okay, I'm going to go heal your servant." And he says, hold on. I'm not worthy to have you in my house. I know you can heal him just by saying it. You don't need to come to my house. I'm not worthy of having you in my house. And Jesus looks at this man who is full of compassion for taking care of his servant, humility, thinking he's not worthy of having him in his house, and faith, believing Jesus can heal. And this is what he says about this man. When Jesus heard this, he marveled and said to those who followed him, "Truly I tell you, with no one in Israel have I found such a faith. I tell you, many will come from east and west and recline at the table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, while the sons of the kingdom will be thrown into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Again, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, they are alive, even though their bodies have passed away. And he says, not only are those souls of the deceased still alive, he says that those who are faithful, those people like this soldier who have such great faith, he's going to recline with them at the table. He's going to have a feast with them. He's going to be sitting with those people who have passed away. Not only do we have souls that continue on after we die, but we get to be reunited with them. Humans have souls. The souls live after the body dies. When Jesus returns, the body and soul are reunited. The bodies and souls of the faithful are united in heaven. The bodies and souls of the faithless are destroyed in hell. And Jesus gives two options here, right? You want to sit with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Or do you want to be in the outer darkness, weeping and gnashing of teeth? The torment that makes you grind your teeth. There's not much detail given in these two, but it's pretty obvious which one's better. Or back to this passage in Matthew 10, right? "And do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear Him, God, who can destroy both soul and body in hell." On earth, the body is going to pass away, but not the soul. Only God alone can destroy the body and soul, and He does that in hell. You see, the resurrection is something I don't think we always talk about. Because when we start talking about it, I don't know, maybe it's because movies and TV shows love talking about the zombies so much, right? And when we talk about dead people coming back alive, that's what we might think of. Or maybe it's just a little bit too supernatural or miraculous for us to talk about. But the truth is, the resurrection is extremely logical. It is very logical, and it makes complete sense to say Jesus came back to life and that all of His followers will come back to life. Because if you believe in the existence of God, a being that has the power to create all the universe, then it's really not that crazy to believe that God can bring a dead person back to life. I mean, where did this world come from? How did it begin? How was this world created? What was the beginning? You keep going back and back and back. Whatever started this universe happened before this universe. Whatever started this universe had to be powerful enough to create the universe. Whatever started this universe had to exist outside the universe. That sounds like God to me. And so if you believe in a God who can do anything, who can create this universe, then it's really not that big a pill to swallow to think He brings dead people back to life. If you believe in God, it takes even less reasoning to believe in the resurrection. This is comforting to know that we can see our loved ones in heaven. We'll be able to look them in the eyes and to hug them again. We'll be able to look at them to tell them that we've missed them. I think in heaven we're going to know each other. Heaven, I don't think, would be much of a comfort if we're not able to recognize our loved ones in heaven. See, heaven is beyond our understanding. I mean, we don't have too much of an actual description of what heaven's going to be like, but just a couple of hints here and there. See, heaven is going to be perfect, but it's not going to be our definition of perfect, right? Like God is perfect, but He's not our definition of perfect. Heaven is not going to be your own personal paradise where you get literally everything you want. No, heaven is God's presence. We're not going to have everything we want in heaven, and unfortunately, we're not going to have everyone we want in heaven. In Revelation 21:4, God, a voice from heaven says this about heaven. A voice from the throne of God says this about heaven. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall be there mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. You know, the question is, how can it be that we're going to not have some loved ones in heaven and still have no pain? Well, I think our perspective is going to change when we get to heaven. We're not going to have this earthly perspective. We're going to have a holy, heavenly perspective. We're going to be able to understand things that we weren't able to understand here on earth. Missing our loved ones would probably fall into the category of pain and mourning for sure right now, but perhaps we will not have any remembrance of them, or perhaps we're going to understand how their absence glorifies God. In this passage, I want to note something, because it doesn't say we're never going to cry in heaven, does it? It says there's going to be no mourning and no crying, but look at the beginning of the passage. He's going to wipe away every tear from their eyes. I mean, which is it? Are we going to cry or are we not going to cry? In order for God to wipe away tears, we got to cry first, right? It sounds to me like there will be crying and then no more crying. A period of grief and then no more grief after. It sounds to me like God is comforting us as we cry for the very last time. And I think that's what heaven is going to be like. I think when Jesus returns, there's going to be a lot of tears shed, but it's going to be for the very last time. When we realize the people we love aren't in heaven, we will cry, but we're going to gain a better understanding, and God's going to provide us comfort, and we're going to find peace and joy in heaven. That's what I think of whenever I see this passage, when God says He's going to wipe away their tears. So they are crying, but God's going to help them cry no more. And I think there are plenty of passages that demonstrate that we're going to know each other in heaven, right? Matthew 8 that we just looked at, where He says, you're going to sit with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That would be a weird thing to say if we're not going to know it's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Or Luke 16, right? When you have the rich man and Lazarus, after they pass away, you have this scene happening in the spiritual world, whatever happens after they passed away. The rich man recognizes Abraham, recognizes Lazarus. They maintain their personality. They maintain their memories. They maintain their names. You have Luke 9, whenever Jesus goes up to the mountain, you have this transfiguration where Moses and Elijah appear on the mountain. Now, they've been dead for millennia, and yet they're still Moses and Elijah. And the disciples are able to recognize them as Moses and Elijah. Luke 10, Jesus says, our names are written in heaven. Makes me think we're still going to have our names. To 2 Corinthians, Paul says, when the Lord comes back, I'm going to be bragging about you, and you guys are going to be bragging about me. That wouldn't make sense if we don't recognize each other. 1 John 3, John says, we don't know how heaven's going to be, but we know that we're going to be like Jesus. We're going to be able to see Jesus. If we're able to recognize Jesus, then there's a good possibility we might be able to recognize others. 1 Thessalonians 4. Again, heaven would not be much of a comfort. It's not comforting to know that we're going to meet our loved ones again if we don't know they're our loved ones. Right? There's no comfort and encouragement there. It's comforting to know that we're going to be reunited with them. But that comfort wouldn't come if We can't even recognize them. And then you have Paul, who said, Jesus' resurrection is a first fruit of our resurrection. I think our resurrection is going to be exactly like Jesus' resurrection. And after Jesus was resurrected, He was able to talk to people and be recognized. He was able to eat and have a meal. He was able to do all these normal things. You see, the message ultimately today, humans have souls. The souls live after our bodies die. When Jesus returns, the body and soul are reunited in the resurrection. The bodies and souls of the faithful will be united in heaven. And unfortunately, the bodies and souls of the faithless will be destroyed in hell. Heaven is not supposed to leave us inactive. Heaven is not supposed to be our form of escaping from this world. Heaven is not supposed to be something where we have our mind elsewhere as we live this world. Heaven is something we work for, we strive for, knowing that it's by the grace of God that we're going to get to enter into it. But we work today so that we can rest in heaven. We work today and build up the rewards we're going to get in heaven. We're going to sow so we can reap later. This earth is temporary, but that doesn't mean we abandon this earth. There are people in this world that need to hear good news, that need to hear that we have souls and that although we have sinned, Jesus died for our sin. Our goal is to fill heaven. I want heaven to be as crowded as possible, if that's how it works, you know. I want them to run out of rooms. It won't, but you know what I'm saying. I want to build up the rewards that I'm going to get in heaven. I think heaven needs to be our motivation, knowing full well that it is by the grace of God that we're going to be able to be there. Our goal is to bring as many people as possible to heaven. Our goal is to fill it up. And so as you live your life, do you think about heaven? As you go to work, as you wake up in the morning and you cook yourself breakfast, as you do whatever you do throughout the day, do you think about heaven? I'm sure whenever we're in those difficult times, we think to ourselves, man, it would be nice to be in heaven right now where I'm free from the difficulty. But what about the good times? This is a motivation. The other day I was on the phone with my mom, and I was about to ask her, hey, how's Papa doing? And yet he's passed away in the last couple of years. And I thought to myself, I want to see him again. I can. I know what I need to do. Have faith in Jesus. That I need to let that motivation be there, that all the people that I know that have passed away, that were faithful to God, I get to see them again. That's part of my motivation, to be right with the Lord, to have faith in Him, to repent of the sin in my life, to confess my sins to God, to ask for forgiveness. That was part of my motivation in being baptized and connecting with Jesus. That's part of my motivation as I live my life. I think to myself, I can't wait to tell my grandpa all the things that he missed, all the things about my life. I think back to those days whenever I sat in the garage with him as just a little kid, and he would just be asking me questions. I think back to whenever I would go visit him, and we would be doing a puzzle together. And I miss him. I think, I hope there are puzzles in heaven, because I want to do one with him again. And if there's no puzzles in heaven, that'll be fine. We'll just sit together and talk. That's part of our motivation. Do you have heaven to look forward to? Is that part of your motivation? Are you worried that might not be in your future? Whatever you're feeling, whatever you're thinking, if you have need, whether it's answers, encouragement, comfort. I want you to know that we're all here on a journey that ends in heaven. Let's all get there together. The invitation is going to be open for anyone who needs help this morning. The elders are going to be in the back, and I'm going to be right here in the front. Answer the invitation as we stand and sing.